Have you ever really thought about what goes into getting the nutrition in a single bag of feed just right? I mean, it's way more than a simple recipe, right? It's actually a reflection of some incredibly complex biology. So in this explainer, we're going to pull back the curtain on the science that's powering your formulation software. And more importantly, we'll show you how your work in quality assurance is the absolute key to making it all work for animal health and performance. We're going way beyond the clicks and into the core biology. Okay, so here's our game plan. We're going to start by really nailing down the fundamental challenge that every single nutritionist has to tackle. Then we'll break down the three big pillars of nutritional science. You've got the ever-changing needs of the animal, the kind of unpredictable nature of ingredients, and of course that intricate dance of nutrient interactions. And then we'll tie it all back to the software you manage, showing how your work is what really brings all this science to life.
So, first things first. What is that core challenge at the very heart of feed formulation? Let's dig into the fundamental problem that all this fancy software is really designed to solve. This is the big why that drives the whole system.
It really all starts with this question, doesn't it? If we know what an animal needs to be healthy, why can't we just cook up a simple recipe and call it a day? Why isn't formulating a diet just some simple math that you can set once and just forget about? Well, the answer comes down to one powerful concept: biological variability. I want you to imagine trying to hit a moving target, but the arrow you're using changes its shape and weight while it's in the air. That's pretty much the challenge of feed formulation. We are always aiming for that moving target, the animal's needs, with a tool set that's just as unpredictable: our feed ingredients. All right, so let's take a closer look at that moving target, the animal itself. It's so easy to think an animal just has one set of nutritional needs, but the truth is, its requirements are constantly shifting throughout its entire life. Now take a look at this. It might seem like just a simple chart, but it tells a really profound story about animal development. See, an animal's body is in this constant state of change. A swine embryo is 95% water, but by the time it hits market weight, that number drops all the way down to about 50%. Now, that's not just a fun fact. It's a fundamental biological shift that has a huge impact on what it needs nutritionally.
And here's where the rubber really meets the road. You can see how that changing body composition translates directly to its needs. As an animal grows, the energy it needs just for basic survival, what we call maintenance, it goes up dramatically. This table from Dr. Chiba's handbook shows it perfectly. A pig's maintenance energy needs more than double between 20 and 90 kilos. This is exactly why the software needs different formulas to target the right energy for the right stage of life.
So this brings us to a really key concept: nutrient partitioning. A diet isn't a one-size-fits-all thing. Not at all. It has to be carefully balanced to meet these very distinct demands, whether it's for maintenance, growth, or production. A great example is a sheep. Its diet needs to provide 10 times more of the amino acid cysteine for growing wool than it does for growing muscle. That level of precision is absolutely essential for top performance. Okay, so now let's flip the coin and look at the other side of this whole equation, the ingredients themselves. Because just like the animals, the raw materials we use are anything but consistent. A load of corn, for example, is never just a load of corn.
This quote from Dr. Chiba's work just nails the challenge. A staple ingredient? Corn can have its crude protein vary by over a full percentage point. Now that might not sound like a lot, but trust me, when you're formulating feed on a massive scale, that tiny little variation can have a huge impact, both on how the animals perform and on the company's bottom line.
And this variability isn't just random, It's the result of a whole chain of factors. It starts in the field with the soil and the weather. It continues through how it's harvested and stored, and it follows it right down to how we process it in our own mill and even the lab methods we use to analyze it. It's a long chain. And this is where your work in quality assurance becomes so incredibly important. The formulation software can't just plug in a single average number for corn protein and hope for the best. No way. It needs your accurately maintained data so it can understand the expected range. That's how it can build a diet that meets the animal's minimum needs every single time, even if it gets a batch of the lowest protein corn. Okay, now we're going to dive into the deepest and maybe the most fascinating layer of all this complexity. You see, nutrients don't just exist in a bubble. Once they're in the feed or inside the animal, they start interacting with each other in this complex, hidden web. Think of it this way. Some nutrients are like perfect dance partners. They work together in synergy, helping each other out. But others, they're more like rivals, fighting for the same resources in what we call an antagonistic relationship. And these interactions can happen anywhere, in the feed bag, in the gut, at the cellular level, and they have a huge effect on how well nutrients get absorbed and used.
So here's a perfect example of that synergy in action: vitamin E and selenium. They're both powerful antioxidants that protect cells from damage. As you can see, they basically work in tandem, each one supporting a different part of the same protective process. What that means is, if you have enough of one, you might need a little less of the other, and that's a critical detail that any smart formulation has to consider.
Now, on the flip side, you've got antagonism. In chicks, this is a classic example. The amino acids lysine and arginine basically have to share the same bus to get around in the kidneys. If you put too much lysine in the diet, it hogs all the seats on the bus. This literally blocks arginine from being reabsorbed back into the body, which can cause a deficiency, even if the diet technically had enough arginine in it to begin with. So let's recap. We have this massive three-dimensional problem: an animal with needs that are always changing, ingredients whose content is always varying, and this wild web of complex nutrient interactions. So how on earth do you solve that puzzle consistently and, affordably?
Well, this is where it all comes together. The formulation software. It's so much more than a fancy calculator. It's more like a highly skilled orchestra conductor. It takes all these different instruments, the animal's needs, the ingredient variations, all those interactions, and it harmonizes them. Its job is to create this perfect symphony of nutrition by finding the least cost formulation, which is the most economical blend of ingredients that still meets every single one of those complex biological requirements.
And this is where you, as a QA professional, come in. You are a vital part of this whole scientific process. You define the biological needs by setting the specs. You quantify that ingredient variability through analysis. And by maintaining the system, you're making sure the software's models for all those complex interactions are spot on. You are, in short, the guardian of this digital model, making sure it always reflects real-world biology.
So let's just redefine what software maintenance really means. It is not just data entry. It is the scientific stewardship of a biological model. It's that critical link that makes sure the math happening inside the machine accurately reflects the biology happening out in the barn. So, the next time you're updating an ingredient analysis or just double-checking a specification, I want you to remember this. You're not just managing a program. You are practicing science. Your attention to detail is the bridge between all this complex nutritional science and the simple act of feeding an animal. It's the key that makes sure every single bag of feed delivers on its promise of health and performance. And that's a responsibility worth celebrating.